Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going deep into some pretty complex research at the crossroads of cognitive science, artificial intelligence, and how they're being used to model social behavior. We've got a stack of academic papers and research articles here, and to be honest, some of it gets really dense, but our mission is to break it down for you, to help you understand how researchers are trying to connect what's going on in our individual minds to those larger social dynamics we all experience in our lives. Now, as someone who follows this field, you're probably familiar with the invisible hand idea in economics, where people acting in their own self-interest can sometimes unintentionally create benefits for the whole system. Well, researchers are finding similar patterns in cognition, and that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, it's not just about taking Adam Smith's ideas and applying them to a new field. What's really cool is that these cognitive models are showing us surprising ways that individuals, without even realizing it, are contributing to the greater good. Like, there was this one study that modeled how people allocate resources in a shared environment. And they found that even when people are focused on their own gains, the overall distribution of resources can end up being more fair than you'd expect.
So it's like there's a hidden wisdom in all those seemingly chaotic individual actions. Thinking about how this might play out in, say, a workplace. People are heads down on their own projects and deadlines, but somehow the team still manages to pull it together and get things done.
Exactly. And these models are helping us see the underlying mechanics of that. They reveal the feedback loops, the emergent patterns that connect those individual actions to the bigger picture. It's not always smooth or predictable, but there's a logic to it that we're only beginning to grasp.
This whole idea of linking individual minds to those larger social outcomes, it's like trying to map the roots of a giant tree, incredibly complex. The research talks about cross-level analysis as one way they're tackling this. Could you unpack that a bit? How does that actually work in practice?
Imagine you're trying to understand how a flock of birds can fly in perfect formation, right? You could look at the flock as a whole, but you could also zoom in on the behavior of each individual bird, how they sense their surroundings, how they make decisions. Cross-level analysis is about bringing those different perspectives together. For example, you could use brain imaging to see how neurons fire when someone responds to social cues, and then use that information to build a computer model of group behavior.
Yeah.
By connecting those levels, we can start to see how those tiny neural processes actually contribute to the larger dynamics of the whole flock.
That's so much clearer than just trying to define the term. It really highlights how this goes beyond just observing what people do. It's about getting at how our brains actually process social information.
You got it. And what's really exciting is that some researchers are even integrating those different levels of analysis within their models. They're building what they call mixed-level models that combine social and cognitive elements together.
Okay, so how would a mixed level model work in a real world setting?
Well, think about designing a traffic management system for a smart city. A traditional model might just treat each car as a simple unit, but a mixed-level model could factor in things like driver behavior, reaction times, even how stress affects their decisions. By including those individual differences, you could potentially create a system that's both safer and more efficient.
So these models are getting pretty sophisticated. Speaking of sophistication, the research also digs into cognitive architectures. It's like they're trying to reverse engineer the human mind by building computer models that simulate how we think.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. But these architectures aren't meant to be perfect replicas of the human brain. They're more like frameworks for understanding those core processes that drive thinking, learning, and decision-making.
I'm seeing a few big names pop up in the research. ACTR, Soar, CLARION. Each one seems to take its own unique approach to simulating the mind.
They do. ACTR, for instance, is often compared to a massive library of memories and rules. It focuses on how we retrieve information from that library, how quickly we can access memories or apply learned rules.
So it's like modeling the efficiency of our internal search engine.
You got it. Now, SOAR, on the other hand, is more focused on problem solving. It models how we break down complex tasks into smaller steps, set goals, and adapt our strategies when we hit a snag.
It's like simulating how we plan a trip, figuring out the route, making adjustments when there's an unexpected detour.
Exactly. And then there's CLARION, which is kind of unique because it's a multi-level system. It tries to integrate both conscious and unconscious processes to explain how we learn and make decisions.
So it's acknowledging that there's a lot going on beneath the surface of our awareness, those gut feelings and intuitive leaps that we can't always explain logically.
Right. It's about More than just the rational steps, it's about the emotional and intuitive factors that influence our choices, which is a crucial part of human cognition that Clarion is trying to capture.
So we've got these different cognitive architectures, each with its own angle on simulating how we think. But why go through all this trouble? What's the practical use of building these virtual minds?
It's not about creating digital copies of ourselves.
Mm.
These models are being used to simulate all sorts of human activities, air traffic control, robot navigation, even how people interact in virtual environments. It's about understanding the principles behind those activities.
That's pretty amazing. But I'm curious, how do they even begin to model something as complex as teamwork? You can't just program two virtual minds to cooperate perfectly, right?
You're absolutely right. Teamwork is one of the toughest things to model because it involves coordinating actions, sharing information, negotiating roles, all while dealing with potential conflicts and miscommunications.
It's like trying to choreograph a dance where every dancer has their own unique style but needs to be in sync with everyone else to make it work.
And that's where the concept of distributed cognition comes in. It recognizes that knowledge and problem solving aren't limited to individuals. They can be spread across multiple people and even include technology.
So it's not just about individual brilliance, but about how those minds connect and interact to achieve a common goal. Are there any examples of how researchers are actually studying teamwork in these complex simulated environments?
There's one study in these papers where they simulated a planning meeting for a Mars mission. They created this virtual environment that recreated the challenges of working in close quarters with limited resources and a high-stakes goal. And what they found was that the most successful teams were able to share the cognitive load, communicate effectively, and adapt their plans based on feedback from each other and the environment.
It's like watching mission control in action, but with the added bonus of being able to analyze every single decision they made. This is making me rethink how I approach teamwork. I tend to focus on my own tasks, but now I'm seeing how all those individual efforts fit into a much larger, more dynamic system. But there's one thing we haven't talked about yet: emotions. We've been focusing on rational thinking, but how do emotions fit into these models? They seem messy and irrational.
That's a great point. For a long time, researchers did try to avoid emotions, but now they're realizing that emotions are actually crucial for how we navigate the social world.
It's like trying to understand a movie without the soundtrack. Emotions add the color and depth, shaping how we see things and what we do.
Precisely. Researchers are now focusing on social emotions, those that come from our interactions with others. Guilt, shame, pride, empathy.
So instead of trying to remove emotions from the equation, they're actually trying to build models that show how emotions influence our social behavior.
That's right. And it's a huge challenge. But they're asking questions like, how do we decide who to blame or credit in social situations? How do emotions influence our choices? Can we build artificial agents that understand and respond to human emotions appropriately?
Wow, programming empathy into a machine, that seems almost impossible.
It's definitely pushing the boundaries of AI, but there are some fascinating examples in the research. One study analyzed a conversation between a student and a sergeant, trying to model how those emotions were expressed and understood in a hierarchical relationship. Another looked at how virtual humans use social referencing, taking cues from others to make decisions when things are uncertain.
So they're building models that can not only think, but also feel, at least in a simulated way.
That's the direction things are heading, and it brings up all sorts of ethical questions that we'll need to address as these models become more sophisticated.
That's a great point. But before we dive into the ethics, let's acknowledge that just modeling social phenomena is incredibly complex. What are some of the biggest hurdles researchers are facing in this field?
One of the biggest challenges is capturing human variability. We're all different. We have unique experiences, personalities, skills, quirks. Trying to capture all of that diversity in a model is incredibly difficult.
And even if you could perfectly model each individual, there's still that element of unpredictability in human behavior. Sometimes we're rational, sometimes emotional, sometimes we just do things that make no sense at all.
That's why these models are always evolving. They're not meant to be perfect replicas of reality, but more like tools for understanding all those complex factors that shape the social world.
It's like using a map to navigate a city. The map can guide you, but it can't replace the experience of actually being there, interacting with the people, soaking in the atmosphere. But these models can still give us insights that we wouldn't get from just watching people, right?
Exactly. They let us isolate variables, test different ideas, explore how various factors interact in a controlled environment. It's like a laboratory for studying human behavior.
So it's about augmenting real-world research, using these models to enhance our understanding of how everything fits together.
Right. And as we refine these models, we're gaining a deeper understanding not only of how individuals think and act, but also how those individual minds interact to create the patterns of social life.
It's like having a fast-forward button on human history, watching how societies might evolve over time.
And that's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's recap some of the key points we've covered so far.
Sure. We started by exploring the invisible hand at play in cognition, how individual thoughts and actions can have unintended social consequences, often for the better.
Then we zoomed in and out between individual minds and those larger social structures, highlighting how important cross-level and mixed-level analysis is for understanding the big picture.
We also delved into the world of cognitive architectures, ACTR, Soar, and CLARION, which are like the blueprints for building thinking machines, each with its unique approach to simulating human mental processes.
And we even touched on the challenges of modeling teamwork and how researchers are incorporating emotions into those models.
Despite the hurdles, there's this huge sense of potential here. This research could transform how we understand human behavior, how we design more effective organizations, even how we build intelligent systems that can collaborate with us in meaningful ways. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
This is really thought-provoking stuff. So for you, the listener, think about this. We've given you a peek into the world where minds meet machines, where researchers are trying to crack the code of human behavior using these incredible tools. But this is just the beginning. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore the exciting opportunities and potential risks of this groundbreaking research. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We just finished talking about how researchers are trying to connect what's going on in our individual minds to those larger social patterns we see in the world. Now let's switch gears a bit and think about the implications for artificial intelligence, the potential, the risks, all that mind-bending stuff. One of the things that really stands out in these papers is the idea of AI becoming much more socially intelligent, not just in terms of what it understands, but how it actually interacts with us. Imagine AI that could not only process the words you're saying, but also pick up on your emotional state, even if you're trying to hide it.
Okay, that's both fascinating and a little creepy. It's like having a virtual assistant who can tell if you're getting frustrated, even if you're trying to be polite about it. Where do you see that going?
Well, think about healthcare, for instance. An AI system that could understand a patient's emotional state could offer much more empathetic and personalized care. It wouldn't just be about treating symptoms, but about understanding the person as a whole.
That would be huge. A doctor who not only diagnoses you, but really gets where you're coming from emotionally. But I can't help but think of those sci-fi movies where the AI starts manipulating people's feelings. That's
Yeah.
where things get a little scary.
Right, and the researchers are definitely aware of those concerns. As these AI systems become more sophisticated, we have to make sure they're designed with safety measures, transparency so we can understand how they're working, and accountability so someone's responsible if things go wrong.
It's like giving someone a powerful tool without any instructions or safety warnings. The research does mention some interesting ways they're trying to address these challenges. One study that caught my eye was about using virtual humans to play a tactical military training game.
Ah, yes. That's a great example. It's like a virtual boot camp for AI where they can practice collaborating, making decisions under pressure, all without any real-world risks if they make mistakes.
This is where it gets really mind-blowing. These virtual humans aren't just following a pre-programmed script, right? They're actually using cognitive architectures like ACTR to make decisions based on their own virtual perceptions and goals.
You got it. They're equipped with knowledge about military tactics, communication protocols, even basic cognitive functions like memory and attention. We're not talking about simple bots here.
It's like they have mini minds of their own, operating in this virtual world and trying to figure things out, just like humans would. What's even cooler is that they're also programmed with a sense of social awareness, coordinating with each other, following orders, adapting to changing situations.
That's a key element in simulating realistic teamwork. Having individual skills isn't enough.
Yeah.
Those skills have to be integrated into the dynamics of a group. So like a real-world military unit, but now we can actually analyze every interaction, every decision they make.
So how do researchers measure whether these virtual teams are actually successful? Is it just about winning the game?
It goes way beyond that. They look at things like how quickly and efficiently the team makes decisions, the clarity of their communication, their ability to adapt when unexpected things happen, things that matter in real-world teams too.
So they're not just testing the AI, they're trying to uncover principles of effective teamwork that we could apply in all sorts of situations. But one thing I keep coming back to is how difficult it must be to program truly effective communication between these AI agents. Human language is so nuanced, filled with sarcasm, humor, unspoken assumptions, things a dictionary can't capture.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the most cutting-edge areas in AI research right now. Some teams are focused on creating extremely structured communication protocols, almost like a special code, to minimize misunderstandings.
It's like designing a universal translator for ideas and intentions rather than just words. I can see how crucial that would be in a high-stakes environment like the military.
Precisely. But other researchers are taking a different approach. They're trying to teach AI systems to learn language more organically, through experience, the way humans do, by making mistakes, picking up on context.
That's a whole different level of challenge. It's not just about teaching vocabulary, it's about understanding the subtleties, the emotional weight of words, even humor things that make human communication so complex.
Exactly. We're not quite there yet. But it's amazing to see how far the research has come in bridging the gap between how humans and machines communicate.
Speaking of gaps, there's still that fundamental difference between our sensory experiences and what AI can perceive in these virtual worlds. We rely on sight, sound, touch, even intuition to navigate the world. How do they make those simulations realistic enough for the AI to learn?
That's one of the key things they're focusing on when creating these virtual environments. They're building virtual cities, realistic landscapes, even social structures to make it more like a training ground with real-world complexity rather than just a simple game.
It's like creating this giant playground for AI where it can safely experiment and learn, but with enough realism to make it meaningful. But even with all of that, capturing the essence of human behavior, those moments of irrationality, our gut feelings, the decisions we make that sometimes don't even make sense to ourselves, that seems almost impossible to program.
It's definitely a huge challenge trying to model that unpredictability. But researchers are working on it. Some are using machine learning to allow AI to learn from its mistakes, to adapt to new situations, even to exhibit some degree of creativity. It's about building in a little bit of that human flaw, you could say, to make the AI more realistic.
So it's almost like they're giving the AI a little bit of human fallibility, making it less like a perfect machine and more like us.
In a way, yes, but we always have to remember that these are just models, representations of reality, not reality itself. It's like the difference between looking at a map and actually exploring a city.
That's a great analogy. The map can guide you, but it can't replace the feeling of actually being there, taking in all the sights and sounds, the energy of the place. But these models still give us insights that we couldn't get from just observing humans in the real world, right?
Absolutely. They give us a way to isolate specific factors, to test different ideas, to control the conditions in a way that's impossible with real people. It's like having a laboratory for studying social behavior.
So they're more like a complementary tool, not a replacement for real-world research on human behavior.
Exactly. And as we get better at creating these models, we're gaining this deeper understanding, not just of how individuals think and act, but also how all of those minds interact to create those larger patterns we see in social life.
It's almost like having a fast-forward button for human evolution, seeing how societies might emerge and change over time.
And that's where things get really exciting and a little bit daunting. Because with that knowledge comes a responsibility to use it wisely. We have to be really careful about the potential downsides, the ethical implications of creating AI that's so good at understanding us.
That's such an important point. We'll definitely need to delve into those ethical questions and what all of this means for the future. Welcome back. In the last two parts, we really dug into how researchers are using AI and cognitive science to understand human behavior, especially in social situations. Now, I'm curious, how are these insights being put to work in the real world?
Well, one area where this is already having a big impact is in designing more effective organizations. Traditionally, most organizations are structured as hierarchies. Clear lines of authority, top-down decision-making. But researchers are exploring totally different models inspired by biological systems, things like ant colonies or swarms of birds.
So you're talking about moving away from that traditional rigid hierarchy and towards something more fluid and adaptable.
Exactly. Imagine organizations that can quickly adapt to unexpected changes, learn from their mistakes, and evolve organically without constantly needing directions from the top.
That sounds like a pretty radical shift. Wouldn't that completely change how we think about leadership?
It definitely would. And these computational models we've been talking about are helping researchers understand leadership in a whole new light. They're exploring how trust is built within teams, how influence works, how individuals emerge as leaders in different situations.
It's not just about identifying the traits of a good leader. It's about understanding how leadership functions as part of a complex system.
Right. And these insights have implications not just for people in formal leadership positions, CEOs, managers, that sort of thing, but for anyone who wants to have a positive impact, whether it's in their workplace, their community, their family.
It's like empowering everyone to be a leader in their own way, to contribute their unique skills and perspectives. But even in these more decentralized systems, there's still a role for human leadership.
Right.
Absolutely.
And researchers are using these models to study the dynamics of leadership, how trust is built, how influence works, how people naturally take on leadership roles in different situations.
It's like they're trying to decode the art and science of leadership to create environments where everyone can thrive and reach their full potential.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that even the most sophisticated models are still just that, models. They can be incredibly useful tools for understanding and improving organizations, but they're not a replacement for human judgment, empathy, and compassion.
That's a really important point. As we rely more and more on technology and data, it's easy to lose sight of the human element.
You're right. And that brings us to another crucial aspect: the ethical implications of all of this. If we can model human behavior with this level of detail, predict how people might act, even influence their decisions, what are the potential risks? Where do we draw the line?
Those are big questions, and they're not going away anytime soon. It's like we've discovered this powerful new tool, and now we have to figure out how to use it responsibly.
Exactly. We need open and honest conversations about the ethics of using these models, involving diverse voices, making sure that they're used to benefit society as a whole, not for manipulation or control.
It's like we need a set of ethical guidelines for this new age of artificial intelligence, a roadmap for navigating the uncharted territory of a world where human intelligence and machine intelligence are increasingly intertwined.
That's a great way to put it. As we grapple with these challenging questions, we also need to acknowledge the incredible potential of this research. We're living in a time of remarkable scientific discovery where we're gaining a deeper understanding of ourselves, our societies, even the nature of reality itself.
It's like we're setting out on this incredible journey of discovery, a quest to understand the universe and our place in it. And even though we may never have all the answers, the journey itself is what's so exciting. It's a testament to the human spirit of curiosity and the power of our collective imagination.
Well said. We've taken you on quite a journey in this deep dive, exploring how researchers are using AI and cognitive science to understand the complexities of human behavior, from the inner workings of the mind to the dynamics of entire societies. But this is just the beginning. We encourage you to keep asking questions, to keep exploring, to keep diving deep into those fascinating mysteries that make us human. And until next time, keep those minds engaged.